show, and this is a lot of fun. I usually don't go on until about 1 in the afternoon, where the show I do with Atan Thomas. But you know what? Sometimes life pulls you in different directions, and I'm thrilled to have a conversation with the great Brandon Steiner, sports memorabilia expert, titan of the industry, and he's got some really neat things that he's been doing during the course of the quarantine. So, Brandon, I welcome you. Thanks for hanging out for a little while.
Well, thank you. This is like dinner for me. I've been up since like 4:30 this morning. So,
oh my goodness, I do that on Mondays and Tuesdays, and I'm a nuisance by at least noon.
Yeah, it's crazy. I just feel like I have so much more time to do more, and somehow the days are getting expanded without the travel and all the distraction. You get a lot done. Can't argue that.
No, it's definitely interesting. First of all, I presume you're healthy. I hope everybody in your family's healthy. How has the quarantine? What have the last 6 months been for you? You broke up for a second. I missed
that question. If you could ask again.
Yeah, you broke up for a second there. No, how has quarantine been? I'm assuming you're healthy. I'm assuming everybody in your family's okay. How have the 6 months been?
It's been interesting. I'm such a sports junkie, and you know, I'm always traveling, tracking, probably going to way too many games that I even like to admit. But it's been really good. I've been able to refire on a lot of accounts because of the lack of distraction. What's crazy is, you know, I started 2 new companies, and Collectible Exchange being the bigger one, where it's kind of a form of eBay. And I go into this virus and I'm thinking, you know, Seth, like, I think maybe I'm done. I'm like, I don't know, maybe time to retire. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll just run the Steiner agency, which is the other company which markets players. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing that for 30 years. Maybe I'll just do that. And all of a sudden, everyone is calling me under the moon, sun, and stars because they've been home and their wives like mine. Clean out your garage, clean out your closet, clean out, you know. And I think collectors don't realize how much they have. So I've been bombarded with stuff to put on auction, stuff to put on my site. I think I'm up to about 60,000 items on the site and growing. Wild. And the site is just completely blown up, which I'm thinking I'm done. I'm about to jump off a bridge in March, April. I figure, how am I going to launch this company? How's this ever going to take off? And it ended up being a very, very productive June, July, and August for me, particularly since I could focus and answer all these people's questions and help them with their problems.
It's just so funny because you hear stories like that of places that you thought would shut down because the world was being shut down, and you twist it and you turn it, and the next thing you know, you have something that can really be marketable. You have Collectible Exchange, so with an X, collectibleexchange.com, and you can also visit bidcx.com, and I'll put both those links in the chat room.
Like we're doing an auction with the Liberty, we're doing a big auction now, and there's probably 5 other auctions that are lined up. But you know what's crazy is when people get a little bored, and remember for a while there were no games,
right? So
you tend to go back to what you know and what you remember, and that's kind of what people did. So that not on top of that, but on top of that, we were watching those old games on TV. So I guess people were just in the mood, especially
getting nostalgic.
The Jordan thing really kicked off the nostalgia. Like everybody's Dennis Rodman, Barkley, you know, they just feel in the 90s hoops, which as they should, because the last time we'll ever see the NBA as that was, you know, right. The physicality, the intensity level, the brutality. I mean, not that I'm complaining about the NBA now, though I could. I do like the NBA now, but I love the NBA in the 90s. You know, just loved it.
No, and I said that documentary was being unfairly lauded because it's great. Don't get me wrong, it's good, but it's not the best one that the 30 for 30 group has made. It's just the only one that was airing when there was nothing else going on. And so you can't look at ratings numbers as the evaluation, like the Big East 30 for 30 or the Elway to Marino 30 for 30. Like some of those were, I thought, journalistically better as documentaries. Even the OJ documentary was better than the Michael Jordan, but we all needed it because there was nothing else going on. And a lot of times, a lot of our opinions get skewed because ratings for things ESPN tried horse, and it got great ratings, even though it was a crappy broadcast. But it's still they all thought it there, and that's pretty wild.
The excitement for that 30 for 30 was at a high. I think journalistically, you're probably right. But what made the difference there is we've never seen Jordan, the trend. We never seen him open up like that, and that really was the game changer. To see Jordan say, "Yeah, that guy pissed me off, and I torched him. I blew him up. How dare you say this guy was better than me? Yeah, it lit me up."
Yeah.
And then he went after some guys in his normal, typical way. I call it the silent punch. And rightfully so. I mean, he took a beating. And that was the other thing I noticed. Like, I've never seen a player take a beating and teams go after a player and then admit it. I mean, competitors admitting. So that's what made that doc really interesting. It's like, and I've gotten to know Jordan a little bit over the years. So some of that I kind of knew, his level of insane competitiveness. But I thought it was a great message for the kids and younger people to realize that, hey, if you want to be extraordinary and be a potential GOAT, the level where you have to go is not always that pretty.
No, there's no question about it. Turd Slammer. I love how people use their screen names here. Turd Slammer says, "What's up, guys? Thanks for the show. Big baseball collector here. Welcome. Thanks for checking us out, and thank you for the follow. Folks, you can follow this channel, and you get alerts every time we go on. Like I said, normally we go on at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, except when Brandon Steiner agrees to do 9 a.m. We get to do 9 a.m., and it throws everybody for a loop. One thing that I know my partner, Etan Thomas, will love is you have the autographed Washington Wizards jersey from Michael Jordan. Etan was on that team, so he probably has his own jersey that looks just like it.
I hope so. What's crazy about Jordan is his memorabilia is through the roof. And it didn't matter whether it was the baseball stuff, the Wizards stuff. He is in a class unto himself. And a lot of players are looking at that from a collectability standpoint. And a lot of players are collecting him, which is where it's really weird.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of the way Michael goes about his collectibles. I just want to stay, and I've told them this. So,
right.
It's less is more, and these outrageous prices. Like the collectible thing is a money play. It's a money grab if you can guess right and buy some of the right stuff. I don't recommend that part of the game. But what I don't like is when the stuff gets so outrageous. I'm a big fan of the brand extension for the player. And I think having a poster that's signed by Jordan in a kid's room is meaningful and should be meaningful to the player. And when you do it to the level where a kid can't even collect you, because remember, Michael's been really tight on licensing. He's one of the first to break out of the licensing. And I just feel like was always tight on licensing, and now he's tight on the autograph. And I think it's a step back because this is when you should be thinking legacy, significance. You should have a poster while kids still remember who you are, because in a few years, you're talking about a lot of people on this planet who have not seen him play. In 5 years from now, you'll
It's crazy that there are college graduates that never saw Jordan.
So, you don't, you want to minimize that as much as you can. And that's what I think collectibles sometimes does. It did it for the old time baseball players. It extended their popularity in their life in conversation with dads and moms and their kids. And I think that players should recognize that as part of the collectible game. And they should differentiate just the money grab to the ability to extend your significance and your legacy.
One thing that I wanted to ask you when I found out we were doing this, and it's something that I noticed, and it's kind of an age thing. I think there's only one answer to it, but I wanted to hear your perspective. And that when I was growing up, I'm 46, so I'm a child of the 80s. And when I was living in the 80s, and Don Mattingly and Dave Winfield were my favorite players because I was a kid, I heard stories constantly of Mickey Mantle and Joe DiMaggio, and I would hear stories of Whitey Ford. Like, those were the stories that I constantly heard. Reggie Jackson, even, of course, Thurman Munson had died the decade prior. And now, today, there are graduates that are the Derek Jeter fan. They are the Jorge Posada fan. And Don Mattingly is considered a relic. And that's all well and good. But what happens, in your estimation, from not just a collectible standpoint, but just from a sports standpoint, what happens to the legacies of Mickey Mantle and Lou Gehrig? And before you answer, the story that made me think of it is, and I'm sure Marty Appel. Marty Appel is a wonderful human being, a dear friend, and he
Great
said, because
storyteller.
I have this podcast, and he wrote a book about Casey Stengel, and he says to me, "Can I come on your podcast to promote the book about Casey Stengel?" And I said, "Oh, you're more than welcome to come on my podcast, but do you think there's a human being out there that knows what the word podcast is, that knows who Casey Stengel is?" And I just wonder that, and I wonder about all the stuff that you're talking about is from my childhood, not what I heard about was collectibles from the years prior. What's your take on the whole idea that sports has now been around so long that there's a whole generation that's kind of being forgotten?
Well, I agree with that. There's no question. I was watching a show last night where the kid said, "What's a payphone?" to his parent. So, I get that. I think we'll see it again. I think we'll see the stories. I think we'll we haven't seen a whole lot. This Jordan thing was the first thing we saw from the 90s that was opened up, and we saw some players upset about it. Listen, players are very careful. If you want to talk about the Yankees, they're very careful. They don't want to be on the wrong side of Derek Jeter. But there'll be stories about A-Rod, Jeter, that relationship, the core four. Those books are going to come because at some point people have moments of time. And it usually happens when they're in their 50s. They start thinking about their own legacies, and they start thinking about stories they could tell, money they can make off the stories they could tell. I mean, I've seen it all. I have a pretty good idea in my little world, just because I spend so much time with the players in the deals that I do. So we'll see it. I think, Casey Stengel, that era is what it is. And it's even amazing how little we talk about Ted Williams, let alone Joe DiMaggio.
That's a great example, but,
yeah. It really, and even Willie Mays, but, Willie didn't help himself over the last 15, 20 years, where Hank Aaron really did. He was a lot more vocal, showed up a little bit, worked his relationship with the leagues. Mickey, for some reason, has this incredible, he's almost kind of like on the Babe Ruth path, from collectability, popularity. It's crazy. I mean, and I think Mickey was a great player. I saw him play and actually had a great relationship with Mickey. So very blessed. Wow. Mickey took a liking to me, and he, if you were on the right side of Mickey, that was a really good side to be on, because he really was a loyal friend, very loyal teammate. But, the funny thing is like he's not, I mean, is he better than Mays? Was he better than Ted Williams? But, from a collectability standpoint, by far, Mantle is way ahead of even Hank Aaron, which is crazy. So his popularity, for some reason, and part of it is he's got the beautiful autograph, and he was much more creative and fun with his autograph and all the stuff he did. So his stories are still being told, and there's just something about him, the aura of him. And I think Jeter will have a little bit of a similar aura too. I think there'll be a lot of stories to be told about Jeter, in my opinion. And he was somebody that was a very, very fan-friendly guy. He did a lot of little things, and it adds up and it helps. Where yet Posada is he's a couple of days away from nobody remembering that he was even the catcher. And yet he's probably crazy. A borderline Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Too.
It's crazy. And I just wonder, and I don't pine for that stuff. I'm appreciative of history, and I studied history, sports history when I was getting into the business, but I never wondered. And you think about a good example, Tom Seaver just passed away. And Tom Seaver had been sick for a long time. So it was no one was shocked by Tom Seaver's passing. And he was a very nice guy, and he pitched before my time. Like, my memories of Tom Seaver are his 300th game as a member of the White Sox against the Yankees. I remember that. And I remember I was 11, so forgive the immaturity. He took a job, I think it was for a year, it might have been longer, when he was announcing Yankee games on WPIX.
Yes.
And I remember making fun of Met fans because your best pitcher now works for us. And I thought that was funny. And I'm not even a Yankee fan anymore, but I still get a kick out of that. Tom Seaver, it's amazing how many people are coming out and honoring him, and all the obits were written. I mean, come on, everybody was
torching him too, which is
sure,
crazy.
and
I
they're
loved him. I had no problem with him.
tell
Tell
me about Tom Seaver. Tell me about your memories of him.
Tom is another one if you're on the right side of it. Well, Tom was a very bright guy, and he had a little bit of a problem with the stupidity or just the average. Sometimes it's just a dummy down fan that I think can be agitated, and he didn't have a lot of patience for that, and sometimes that got the best of him.
Mm-hmm.
But he was great, in corporate settings, when we go do events, when we would go do things. I remember down in the Mets did a travel trip to go watch a couple games down in Florida, and he was like the host. We spent like 3 days with Tom. He was unbelievable. Just phenomenal to hang with. He was a really bright guy, took his business very seriously. He was great with Rizzuto back then, which is another name that is very clearly forgotten.
Phil Rizzuto, yeah.
You're talking about a 50-year baseball guy, and really nobody talks about him. He's very rarely brought up at the stadium. He's just, you rarely see much of a Rizzuto jersey or whatever. He just didn't, and he was just beloved and loved. I represented Phil for 7 years from his Hall of Fame run. There's huge impact on my career. Constant. I picked him up when he was 75 years old, which was different, but he was not a typical 75-year-old. When I loved about Phil, and I also loved about Seaver, they were both two very big storytellers. When Phil got in the Hall of Fame, Seaver was the one that really grabbed him. I remember being in Cooperstown and really Seaver taking Phil under his wing and showing him how the whole thing worked. People don't realize how intense getting in the Hall of Fame is behind the scenes and all the stuff you have to do and how you got ingratiated into this club. And at that time, Seaver was kind of running that club. So he explained it to Phil, all that stuff, because Phil was old already at that point.
Sure.
So, those are the little things. And that club is a very intense club. It's a meaningful club. I wish, onto the Mariano Rivera thought, I wish, and Mariano's dream is to make that club a lot more vocal and really bring that club to the forefront. I hope they do, because those guys are wise. They reached extraordinary levels, and I think they could add some really smartness to youth, to the game. I wish they were more front and center around this country. Just my 2 cents. I really like Tom, though. He was very, I just remember how bright he was, and you could really have a conversation with him about just about anything. The one thing I'd say about Rizzuto, too, is there's nobody who's going to be a bigger fan-driven guy. I was on the street talking with Phil one day outside Yankee Stadium hours before a game started, so it wasn't a lot of people. And this guy stops us. I'm working on this $100,000 deal with Phil. And Phil basically drops the conversation, starts talking to this fan, Joey from Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And starts talking for a half an hour as I'm standing there. And I'm like, Phil, are you kidding? I'm like in the middle. He goes, Brandon, he's one of the biggest Yankee fans of all time. You probably don't know him, and I realized that's where Phil got a lot of his lines from. He had all these eclectic characters from the boroughs that would feed him these lines. He was a guy who acted like he was always talking on a whim, but he was more prepared. He had more Yankee fans fooled than anybody I've ever seen. And he always respected the fans, would sign autographs an hour before the game. He did a lot of little things, Phil. He really loved being a fan favorite, and which is why it kills me now that he's kind of a little bit forgotten. I feel like he doesn't really get the props being one of the great Yankees.
Well, but it's funny because there are people who are college graduates. There are people watching this show. You could be 25, 30 years old, and all you know is John Sterling.
Yeah.
And you're not just a Yankee person. But I find that fascinating. John Sterling came in the 90s, and I left.
Johnstone.
Right, Tommy Hutton.
Johnstone era.
Tommy Hutton. I remember all the old broadcasts. Spencer Ross, and I remember working on something with Spencer Ross, and it was 10-10 wins, and I went into the
Spencer.
And I went into the 10-10 wins office, and there's Spencer Ross, and I'm just having a conversation, and he's going, and the sound cuts are over there, and they're in this, like the way he was talking, and I'm going, oh my God, you called Yankee games. I was like, it's wild.
I remember calling Marv Albert. I got in this business. I was like, I found Marv Albert's number. I'm like, and he was the first guy that I called, and he picked up. He was at ABC. He did the radio, and he picked up. And I realized, I said, Brandon, you're gonna call these guys, which is cool. You need to get over yourself because you need to have something to talk to them about.
Yeah.
So I called Howard and said, look, I may have some things for you, blah blah blah. He was very courteous actually about it. But I realized, like, if I'm gonna start calling celebrities and players, he was the wake up call for me. That's why I remember it. Is like I need to actually call with something on the barbecue. Not about how I was going to do this and do that. And I remember going forward when I started calling players, I made sure I had something actually real to talk to them about.
No,
But,
it's
Howard
so
Cosell.
Yeah. Howard. I never met Howard Cosell. I did meet Marv Albert once, and he didn't want to talk to anybody, but I was 23, and I had just gotten out of Syracuse. And when one of the guys from the Westwood One crew told him, they said, he's a Syracuse guy, and he came right in. I sat in on a quarter. He couldn't have been nicer, but only after he found out I was a Syracuse guy. And if I hadn't been a Syracuse guy, I wouldn't.
His son and his
Kenny was just on. Yes, well, and his brothers, Al and Steve, are my memories because Al called Devils games, and I was a big Devils fan. I still am. And Steve called the New Jersey Nets. And so, and I had Kenny on my Sports with Friends podcast, and because I did a month of trying to find the busiest people in sports that were stuck in their house. So I did a week where I did, and you know all the names. I did Kenny Albert, followed by Ian Eagle, followed by Chris Majkowski. And you know Madge because Madge is the radio engineer for the New York Mets, the New York Giants, the New York Knicks, the New York Rangers, St. John's, and the Olympics. And that's he does 300 nights a year, and he's been stuck in his house. And now he's not, because now, baseball's returned. And it was so fun to do a month of just the busiest human beings going. And Kenny tells the story. And I told Kenny, I said, he said, you didn't ask me anything about my dad. And on the podcast, I said, no, I didn't. I said, but I did want to ask, how's Al and Steve? Because I grew up in New Jersey, and those were my guys. I know who Marv Albert is, and I'm not demeaning but Marv Albert, but I wasn't a Knicks fan. I was a New Jersey Nets fan, and Steve Albert called the games with Bill Raftery.
I think what's amazing is, first of all, what a family we talk about broadcasting, but
yeah,
what I love is that he's in his room and doing games from his room as a kid. And that's what people don't realize. Like, Kenny didn't. Now, listen, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. I'm sure there was a little bit of help there, but he was working on his game as a teenager. Ian Eagle was doing 20/20s on FAN.
Yep. I interned for him. Yep.
Literally doing the 20 for 20s. You didn't just all of a sudden get 20/20s on the night owl.
Yep.
And I just think it's so important to realize, like, you don't get these incredible gigs, and God bless them. I mean, they're doing great, but they didn't start off doing great. You got to do great work, and you got to work your tail off. Like I tell people all the time, it's great to be Brandon Steiner with having done Jeter for 20 years or Yankee Steiner, but I'm in the parking lot.
Right.
I can't tell you how many days at Giant Stadium just waiting for a player to come out so I can get a phone number because there's no cells. Right. Or outside of a locker room or in the parking lot at Yankee Stadium, for 3 hours.
The old Giant Stadium, that tunnel.
Yeah.
I know exactly.
I mean?
And I saw you standing there. I can remember it.
It's very humbling. I mean, when you do all, you got to be committed. And a lot of it's not sexy. Like I tell people, I was doing Lawrence Taylor's fan mail. Carl Banks, Leonard Marshall, John Starks. I was doing their fan mail for 3 years. And that's what gave me the excuse to call them, give them the important letters. And Lawrence just felt really guilty because it was like tons of boxes. I mean, people don't realize how popular Lawrence Taylor was. I mean, every bit of what any other player I've ever seen, popularity-wise. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, I picked up 10 huge boxes of mail to get started. I mean, so, but, those are the humbling things. You're opening up letters for days upon days, hoping maybe you find an appearance or some important stuff. So you go back to Lawrence and you develop that relationship.
It's so funny. How did you get started in this? What was your introduction to collectibles, and how did you know a business could be had here?
What's crazy is when I talk about this in You Gotta Have Balls book, the second book I wrote, and that is, I left the Hard Rock to open up a sports bar, which was a completely crazy idea. And if you're over 50 years old, you know that we never had, there was no sports bars, there was no cable even in New York.
Right.
So there's a Rusty Staub's Rib Joint. We opened up the first big sports bar with a huge satellite dish. We had the only satellite dish in Manhattan, and we were up in there. We would take us an hour to go find a game on the Bird. What's crazy
You'd
is
have to
that
spin
Barry
it.
Halper,
You had that controller
Yeah.
and you'd spin it.
What's crazy is Barry Halper had a paper company. He's a limited part of the Yankees, one of the biggest collectors on the planet. God rest his soul. And he came in and said, "Look, I can help you decorate this place." And I left the Hard Rock. I was trying to decorate it, but I didn't know where to go get the stuff.
Right.
And he comes and says, "If you get paper from my company, if you buy the paper, the napkins, I'll give you like a rookie Seaver." He gave me an incredible Reggie Jackson to hang, and that's how we were able to decorate our first sports bar. There were only 2 sports bars in the entire country. So every athlete was coming in, particularly the Mets would come in. I mean, that's why I'd made good friends with Darling, Keith, and Strawberry at the time. And then the whole team would come in to watch. It was very competitive in the mid 80s. So all the team would come in and want to watch St. Louis and some of the competitive games, the late night games. And that's how I really got to know a whole bunch of the players. So when I started my first company, which was very nerve-wracking, I was really just doing marketing for Straw, Keith. I picked up a kid at the time called David Cohn, who had no idea. This kid was from Kansas City. Had no idea. The whole thing was just kind of. I laugh when I think about the go-between of then and now with David, who's a seasoned New York City guy broadcasting. I sat at a table with David at a fundraiser for an entire night, and he didn't talk. Like David was shy.
Wow.
Quiet.
You don't even think that it's possible.
No, it's even possible. So that's how I got rolling. I was just, trying to find and figure out anything, car washes, anything I could do promotion wise with any of these players. I did a straw mobile with Ford. Keith was hard. Keith would love me and he always wanted to do stuff for me, but he just didn't do a lot off the field. He was a very focused, liked his partying, liked the social life in New York, but he also was very focused on the game. And really wasn't a big, let me go out and sign autographs, let me go do appearances. But Straw, if I came up with a game, was ready to go. I had a couple good things with really the 86 Mets and the Giants. Because most people think of me as a Yankee guy.
Yeah.
But I was very entrenched with the Giants, very entrenched with the Mets. And then in the early 90s, I really started my collectible company with the Rangers, with Messier, Richter, Leach.
94.
Those guys were on board. Nobody really was doing hockey anything. And I knew how loyal the Ranger fans were because I was one of them. So I just started creating stuff out of my butt. I didn't know what I was even doing. But Messier was such a great partner, and he bared with me, really, in helping me set up what was the initial Steiner Sports Collectibles, which most people know. And now Collectible Exchange, he's right on board with me, as I'm going to announce. I went right back to my roots on this. Amongst many things I'm going to be announcing, I haven't mentioned this to anyone, but I'm going to be announcing markmessier.com. I'm working on lawrencetaylor.com. And
look at you.
I went back to some of my original guys that I work with, and just because at this point I want to have fun. I want to work with guys I like. So it's fun. I'm just having fun with these guys.
It's very cool. And I checked out Collectible Exchange. It's a great, it's a very simple website. It's got a lot of great pictures. And you have a couple of things. Well, before I get to that, before we go on to another tangent, I want to thank the folks who are tuning in. We see people coming in and out. If you have questions for Brandon, Brandon can't see the chat room, but I can. So just put your questions in the chat room, and I'll let you know.
Hopefully my social media got posted. You got some Steiner fans there.
I hope so. That's wonderful. And also, make sure you follow this channel, because then when we go live, you will be able to get an alert. And if you have Amazon Prime, and I love telling this story, if you have Amazon Prime, Amazon owns Twitch. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to a channel for free, for absolutely free. You subscribe to a channel and you just link you hit subscribe and you hit, do you want to link Amazon Prime to Twitch? And you say yes. And then you subscribe to my channel and you don't pay a penny. Amazon pays me. That's nice. I like taking money from big companies. That's a lot of fun. So make sure you do that. So if you have any questions, but anyway, I was checking out the website, Collectible Exchange, and it's collectible with an X. It's collectible, the whole word collectible, then Exchange, like X-Men. And you have stuff from the Dome, the Carrier Dome, and I'm a Syracuse alum. We talked about that earlier, and that's my place. That's my I always say the campus of Syracuse University is my Disneyland. Tell me about what you found from the renovated Dome.
Well, we're in the middle of renovating the Dome, so we haven't come up with everything yet. But it's funny. That's
yeah, and if the ACC could cancel their games, please, then you'd have more time to get it ready for basketball.
This is true. I'm sure they're moving ahead.
Did you see that Penn State doctor? Before we tell that story, did you see the Penn State doctor yesterday? Penn State doctor said 15 to 20% of the Big Ten athletes who tested positive all have the heart condition.
Oh, God.
15 to 20%. Now, originally the report was...
You have to know have been taking performance enhancement drugs on some level. So many of the kids do. You have to assume that a lot of them have done that, and they're very susceptible to a very dangerous place with this unfortunate virus.
And I just want, if the SEC, as a Syracuse alum, if the SEC wants to be the guinea pigs, go do it. I'll go watch Alabama play LSU 17 times. I want Syracuse to say, you know what? We're in the interest of safety. This is not it. But they are taking it, and they're playing Liberty this year, and it's driving me crazy. So
I don't blame you. It's a very slippery slope that I hope doesn't come back to bite us, because I know that a lot of people have been patient and a lot of people have been really smart. I call it smartsmanship, and I'm hoping that smartsmanship plays a role here because it has to. It has to, especially when it comes to
the NFL has been doing wonderful. And the NFL, I found out, is doing, during training camp, 3/4 of the NFL stayed in hotels. They were isolated. They were in bubbles, and they didn't play anybody. No wonder your numbers are so low. Now, all the players are going to their respective homes, and they're traveling. Good luck. Good luck.
Yeah,
but at least in the NFL, but at least in the NFL, they're getting paid, and they had the opt-out options. That's not the NFL. I feel differently about than I do college. College, these kids, they don't know what to do. They're worried they're going to lose their scholarships. This is their future. They're trying to do, and they're 22, and you're asking them to make grown-up decisions. So these players don't know any better.
Although there are parents making grown-up decisions too, by the way, in the
but bad ones.
But
bad
of pressure.
Yeah,
my feeling has been, and it's been since May on this, is like, listen. This is not a forever move. You know what I mean? This is a very simple move to say we'll start the season in January. That's what I'm a fan of. Screw everything else. Give yourself a few more months for things to unravel. Maybe there's a vaccine that comes out. Obviously, we're getting better at treating this every day. Doctors are learning more.
Yep,
they're doing
every
more.
day.
They're saving more lives. All I'm saying is this is not a forever decision. And people are like, oh, we're never going to play. No. Instead of playing in September, you'll play in January or maybe the end of December. And then you can make a much more intelligent decision. I like what the hockey thing worked out. The NBA looks like it's worked out. So the bubble thing works out.
Wonderful.
I think the MLB thing's a little wobbly, but they'll probably end up in a bubble for the playoffs. They almost have to, in my mind, not risk the potential of having playoffs and teams all of a sudden not be able to play. So I'm sure they're trying to work out a bubble. But, listen, sometimes money and people do not always use. Listen, you heard the story about they did a survey with a bunch of kids and said, look, if you take this pill, kids that were trying to become Olympians, gold medalists, if you take this pill, you automatically win a gold medal, but you're going to die at the age of 40. Or you can take this other pill and you work really hard and you'll win a gold medal, but you're going to have to work really, really hard for the next 7-8 years. You win a gold medal after 7-8 years, but it's not guaranteed. And I can't tell you the high percentage. This has been documented, this survey, that the documentation, the amount of kids would take the pill and say, I'm okay, I want to win the gold, and I'll die at 40. That's insane. But you understand that mentality is out there.
Yeah.
Back to the smartsmanship for a minute here.
Sure.
On the Dome thing. What's funny is, I want to express this is, and why the virus has been a really positive effect on me is, I've done a lot. I've probably put out 30 million autographs into the marketplace, and I couldn't be more grateful for fans actually buying into what I'm doing over these last 30 years. They didn't have to. So I never take any fan for granted. But what I've done over the summer is I've just got into a lot of rogue, crazy things. Like I never watched a UFC fight. I took on the UFC collectibles. I've never been to a car race. I'm now doing the Indy car race collectibles.
I don't see
it's
it,
like I
but
don't need to
wow.
reheat the same old soup. And I think, I'm always thinking fan. What do fans want? What are going to rock fans? So I'm thinking, how do I go deliver them stuff that's never been done, rather than just going to get a bunch of more Derek Jeter balls or whatever it is. So when I get to the Dome and they got this vinyl, now you and I know how important the Dome is. The Dome is like Yankee Stadium is to New York, or Madison Square Garden, really more likely to New York. It's very significant. I mean, that's where anything great that's ever happened if you live in upstate New York is. So they give me this beat up vinyl roof, and I go to work, and I put together a whole product line with this roof. And I'm one of those guys that I'm not. It's not about where you are, but it's what you want to accept. And we came up with this initial line of product, I was like, this is good, but I still think there's something better. So I figure out how to print, and this is like the next phase, what's coming out, because we did all these cool products, but I figured out how to print a photo of the Dome on the Dome. Now I'm coming up with a series of magical, legendary moments at the Dome. So you'll be able to collect a series of these photos
That's awesome.
of great moments, Pearl's half-court shot and all this, the lacrosse, all that stuff. And I'm printing these photos on the Dome where you can collect this series. And then when we're gonna announce and launch, I'm announcing a bunch of stuff on your show. Not that it's a big deal, but I'm doing these Legends of the Game trading cards. But the trading cards are made out of the Dome. So all the greatest moments, the greatest players in the Dome history, there'll be a limited edition. X amount of them will get signed, and you can collect those. And those cards will be printed on the Dome. So what's nice is, a percentage that's been going to help Syracuse athletics, and it's been fun for Syracuse fans up there. And I'm having a lot of fun with it because it gets me back in touch with all the Syracuse alums and some of the former players. So it's doing really well for a roof. Whoever would have thunk.
A roof.
A roof.
And that roof was always different because, when I was covering games there, if it was a sunny day, you felt the warmth. Like you felt the sunshine.
Oh.
Compared to, for example, I covered games at the Kingdom, and that place, you ever get the feeling when you go to a movie theater in the middle of the afternoon and you walk out of the movie theater and your eyes are all adjusted? That's the Kingdom. The Kingdom, it could be 2:00 in the afternoon and you won't know, literally, you won't know what time it is. Like you lose all sense of time. But the Dome, if it was daytime, it felt like daytime, and if it was night, it felt like night. And I wonder what the new roof is going to be like. I'm so curious, and it's so weird that fans aren't going to be there. And again, I am. No one's a bigger Syracuse fan than I am. I don't want them playing. Their opening game, they're traveling to North Carolina, the school that had to shut down everything because they had 200 something cases. And I'm like, you're going to North Carolina? No, I don't want to. I don't want. Cancel this.
I wish they would have
Cancel
put a
this.
building up there, by the way. And by the way, nobody misses the Kingdom. I've never heard anybody missing the Kingdom. It's the worst building I've ever been in.
It's disgusting.
I got into gridlock on one of the concourses in the Final Four, which I've never been that scared in my life. Like that building had serious issues. It was.
I'll tell you a great Kingdom story. So the Kingdom finale. I was doing the Mariners postgame, and we did an extended postgame. And the media lot, where the media cars could park at the old Kingdom, was behind center field. And normally, after our postgame on a normal day, we would go out, behind home plate. We would go out, and we would go around to center field, and we would go. That's how you'd go. You'd walk around the Dome. And so we were 3 hours after the game because we had done this extended Kingdom finale, and a bunch of us decided we were going to take a picture on the pitcher's mound. And there's this picture of 4 media members standing on the pitcher's mound, and one of the guys, he just says, I always wanted to feel what it feels like to to slide into a base. And he ran and slid into second base. And I, just because I'm a smart aleck and I was dumb and 25 years old, and I said, I wonder what it feels like to crash into the center field wall like Ken Griffey Jr. And I run full speed, and I didn't realize that they had already dislodged the thing because they were getting it ready for the Seahawks, and I didn't know that. and I'm running, and I knock the whole thing, and the whole thing tips over, and we ran so fast to get out of there, and I was mortified.
That's great.
Andrew
Those are
writes,
fun times, man.
Yeah.
especially when you see buildings get put to rest, the memories are
I
around them.
saw the
By the way, we
implosion.
got to
Yeah.
give a little prop to Dave Sims, by the way.
Oh, the great Dave Sims.
And the thing about Dave Sims that people don't realize, and only because he was so gracious and he let me on his shows, but he's like, he was doing talk show radio before ESPN. Yep. I mean, and also, one of the first really vibrant, really successful black commentators, and a sweetheart of a guy who does now the Seattle Mariner games.
And it's ironic because I met him when I was working with the Mariners, and he helped me get the gig with Major League Baseball. And now he's out in Seattle for a decade, and it's so random. Guy. Yeah, what a prince of a guy. Andrew writes, did you or Mr. Steiner ever go to Cleveland Municipal Lakefront Stadium? I believe that was the worst stadium I ever visited.
I only went to the new stadiums. I've been to every baseball stadium.
I've been to the new one.
I was at the new football stadium. What was great about the football one is that I got to go with a bunch of the guys from ESPN. It was a Monday night game. Got to have lunch with Jim Brown. It was one of my highlights. And then we were with Sandy Montag, and we get this because we were with
Sandy Montag. How about that?
Yeah, so we're with Sandy Montag. We get this police escort. It's the first time I ever got a police escort, and we go inside the Browns building to park our car. It was pretty cool. And poor Browns. I'm so glad that the Cavaliers won a championship because I want Cleveland to win more. I just feel I just love the fandom there in Cleveland. Love it.
Yeah, what do they call it? Progressive Field now?
Yeah.
My favorite story about Progressive Field, and I make fun of Cleveland, is when the Cavaliers won, they had their parade. And you can't walk in downtown Cleveland and not see Progressive Field. It's right in the heart of the downtown area. And they had 1.6 million people show up at the Cleveland Cavaliers NBA championship parade, but only had about 18,000 that night for Indians, whoever they were playing. And that means 1.6 million people walked by the stadium and said, nah. Like you couldn't get 20,000 people
and
of 1.6
for $1.
Right.
Whatever they called them. They would have the dogs, the line for the hot dogs.
Oh, God.
Probably longer. If you went to there because you wanted that $1 hot dog.
Yep. That's so funny. So that's so funny.
Do you have a favorite stadium, by the way? Do you have
my favorite baseball stadium, and I've been to 25. I've lost a couple because Atlanta. I have not been to New Atlanta, and I've not been to New Minnesota. So I'm at 20. I was at 28, I think, for a while, and now I'm at 25. But my favorite all time is Safeco, or whatever they call that place now. That's my ultimate. My top 5 would be Safeco, San Diego, Coors Field in Denver is gorgeous. I like Philadelphia a lot. I think Citizens Bank Park is great. I would probably say those. What about you?
Tour of my son, I hit them all, but I put Pittsburgh right up there on the top because
Pittsburgh's good. It's just the press box and the broadcast booths are awful. They're so high, and you can't see them.
Yankee Stadium, because they did you right on the press box, and
it's great.
All that stuff.
Yankee Stadium is nice. Yankee Stadium comes off to me. I'll be totally honest. It feels gaudy. It doesn't feel charming like some of the others. You walk through. What's an example? Walk through Coors Field in Denver, and you feel like you're in a neighborhood. Yeah. In Yankee Stadium, you feel like you're in the golf club. You know what I mean? Like everything's a club and a this and a that, and it doesn't have. I like the old stadium when it used to shake.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was there for the 01, versus the Diamondbacks, the building is literally shaking.
It shook like oh my God! It shook like there's no shaking on, and maybe the stadium was going to come down. I just remember even Girardi's triple. How about Girardi's triple?
Yep.
I've never heard the stadium that loud.
Or Mattingly's home run in '95.
I saw Mantle hit home runs in the old stadium, and it's crazy. Is I used to go to games with my friends from Brooklyn, John Palladino, Glenn, Bobby. We still talk. Mm-hmm. We were 10. Unsupervised. And we went to like 15, 20
in the Bronx.
A year,
right?
And it was no biggie. We got mugged. One of us got beat up by a kid. Went to the Bronx, no problem.
I can't imagine.
It's just amazing how people didn't want to go to the stadium because they didn't think it was safe.
Right.
And then no, people don't even talk about it. So they've done such a good job there as far as that, losing that aura of it all. But by the way, my favorite stadium, I know it's going to be out there,
Sure.
is Arizona. And
oh, it's gorgeous.
Is the food. We rate
and the
my son
pool
and I,
and
we
the
rate
and the
things
pool.
differently. The food, diversity of food, and the diversity of the type of seating you can get and what you get with your seats. And Arizona
It's
really
very nice.
has amazing variations of food. Which, by the way, the Marlins, that park is really weird.
It's gorgeous.
But it's gorgeous.
And
but
that's
it's
the
weird.
best press facility. That by a million is the best press
and the
facility.
best food, because they have that
the best
whole
food
wing where they bring all the locals in.
Yep.
So
Oh, it's the best food.
Phenomenal.
Oh, it's so good. You eat like a king when you're in the Marlins. And Matt Roebuck, who used to be the PR guy, they when Jeter took over, they cleaned house. But Matt Roebuck, who was the PR guy for 10 years, and Rich Waltz used to say, literally, they didn't want people to write bad things. So they just made sure the media was in the best mood, and they took care of the media more than anything.
Smart.
And it was smart. It was very smart. They're the nicest booths, the nicest press box, and the best. And it's the best feel. And I love that place. I just hate where it is. It's in the worst location in the world.
No that stadium will never work.
Never. And when Jeter bought the team, I said, oh, my God, they'll never make that a success. There's nothing he can do.
Their own. The big question is, with what Jeter has seen, and obviously I would assume he's going to be an incredible talent evaluator, quality of personality, kids that are going to want to grow. But, can he start a television network? Can he create some kind of vibe for wealthier people to want to go to regular games? I don't know if it's there. I don't know. I think he got a really good opportunity this year for a pass because,
We'll
there's
see.
no fans. He doesn't have to worry about any of that. All he's worrying about is the quality of his team, because I think it's a struggle for somebody who hasn't been in business before to worry about marketing, promoting. I mean, that's a whole thing in itself that not many people know how to do, let alone do well. Now he gets a pass on all that and just really work on the quality of your team, because, listen, if you have a really good team and they're playing well, at least some of the fans are going to come.
I just think that the problem where it is in Little Havana, you're far enough away from Miami, and you're south enough away from like Lauderdale, and you're really far south from like the Palm Beach, Delray, Boca area, and there's so much money to be spent there. And what I don't think, and tell me if I'm wrong, but if you're a millionaire, living on a beachfront property in Boca Raton, right? Not that I know anybody like that, but just for the sake of the argument, if you're in your 60s, you are not getting in a car, even if you have a driver. You are not getting in your car to go on I-95 or the Florida Turnpike at 5 p.m. to go to Little Havana on a Tuesday night in July, and I don't care if that team's 10-game lead in first place. You're not doing that.
For a minute. Let me stop for a minute.
Tell me.
If I'm a millionaire and I'm living where you just said I'm living, I'm not down there in June, July, and August.
That's a good point too. You're not.
Too freaking hot.
It's hot. You're right.
All the money leaves that area right when
totally
the baseball
right.
season really starts. So, I'm coming back and I'm going somewhere else. I mean, who wants to live in Florida if they have a choice during the course of the summer if you have any kind of money? So now you really have to go and make that place affordable.
That's a great point.
And more, for more up, lower and middle class. Problem is no mass transit.
Right. And again, if you're a millionaire that's going to spend, buy season tickets to the Marlins, you're not going on a Tuesday night. You're absolutely right about the summer. Yeah. And I remember, I just had David Sampson on my podcast, and he was talking about how much the fight was to get the place built. And I get it. I totally get it. I'm not saying that I don't understand why they put it there, but to compare it, because that was the former site of the Orange Bowl, which I would not be surprised if you have pieces of. Do you? You have stuff from the Orange Bowl?
I don't. I've seen stuff come and go on the Orange Bowl, but I'm such a negative of the U. I'm so down.
Okay,
on the
that's
U,
fine. That's fine.
Level of cheating and
but that place on a Saturday afternoon, you could get a bunch of college people to go, and on a Sunday afternoon, you could get Dolphins because it's 8 times a year. It's a very different than 81 home dates, and it's an awful location, and it's doomed. You mentioned Arizona, and I'll tell you a quick funny story from Arizona. In 2005, MLB.TV launched, and there were games that were not televised by either team. So, for example, on a Wednesday afternoon, Arizona would play the Brewers, just hypothetically, and neither network, neither local regional was airing the game. So what they did, and I worked for MLB at the time, what they would do is they would take the scoreboard camera feed and they would send 2 radio guys to go down to whatever the ballpark was, and we would call the game. So I called the games, and I'd probably say 20 games that year.
Wow,
and
that's cool.
With my late partner, the great Daryl Hamilton, who is my best friend, and he and I would travel to Arizona. We would hang out for a couple days because we would always insist on going the day before so we could see them up close and talk to players and get some knowledge. So we would make like a 3-day trip out of it, and we would go. And in Arizona, I would ask for the hard files, the MP4 files of the game. As a matter of fact, on Memorial Day, when there were no sports, I aired one of my old games on this Twitch channel. And we were going through, and in the Arizona game, they would show the game. So, like, if it's a ground or a short, you would see the shortstop throw it to first base. But when they went to commercial, they didn't have commercials because it's the scoreboard feed. The cameramen would zoom in on the pool and just zoom in on the hot girls sitting in their bikinis in the pool. And so I have an MP4 of Daryl and I calling a Brewers Diamondbacks game, but every half inning it's interspliced with, while the teams are changing sides, these gorgeous women. That video, I think, has a shot.
I love it. That's
Very
fun.
fun.
That was great practice for you, though.
Oh, it was
What
so
a
much
great
fun.
opportunity.
It was great.
Who ran the network back then?
So back then, this before